perhaps it was because there were so many other gods, and it wasn't even like there was one that came to the forefront. So it kind of almost gave the impression that they would turn to basically any other god, as they thought all these other gods were more worthy of their worship than the Lord. So God basically replies with, nope, get somebody else to help you. What's up, cool people? My name is Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Alright, Judges chapter 10. Last chapter, there was a whole big deal with, one of Gideon's sons named Abimelech basically taking control of Israel, or at least Shechem, and doing so rather violently. And then a few years later, there's a rebellion against him, lots of fighting, and he winds up getting killed in the midst of all that infighting. Basically, bring about the, a curse that was pronounced upon him by one of his half-brothers, basically the only one who seemed to survive. So, yeah, in the fallout of all that, I guess, is where we get to chapter 10 here. After Abimelech died, Tola, son of Puah, son of Dodo, was the next person to rescue Israel. He was from the tribe of Issachar, but lived in the town of Shamir in the hill country of Ephraim. He judged Israel for 23 years. When he died, he was buried in Shamir. Okay. Not a whole lot to say there, just that was the next person who was judge, and it doesn't even say who he rescued them from. It just said Tola was the judge, he rescued them. He served as judge for 23 years and then died. Sometimes they don't have, the big, broader stories on these. It makes me wonder why, just a little bit. Were these other situations that are explained with more detail really that much more grand than the ones that are kind of getting glossed over here? Either that, or there's just not as much of a record kept because the story wasn't told as often or something. I don't know. But anyway, not much else to say on that, since there's not much there. So, verse 3. After Tola died, Jair from Gilead judged Israel for 22 years. His 30 sons rode around on 30 donkeys, and they owned 30 towns in the land of Gilead, which are still called the towns of Jair. When Jair died, he was buried in Camon. And that's all that it says about him. At least it added the detail that he had 30 sons riding on 30 donkeys and owned 30 towns, which still isn't even half the number of sons that Gideon had. Still ridiculous, though. At least from from our modern day perspective, that seems kind of ridiculous. I'm not excusing it or saying that it was fine back then. It was a bit more common, though, maybe. I mean, apparently, if within only 2 generations of each other, you have someone who had 70 sons and then another person who had 30. Anywho, footnote, Hebrew says Havoth Jair instead of saying the towns were called the towns of Jair. That's probably more so the translation of Havoth Jair. Okay. Then we get to verse 6, and apparently something that gets explained in a little more detail. Again, the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. They served the images of Baal and Ashtoreth, and the gods of Aram, Sidon, Moab, Ammon, and Philistia. They abandoned the Lord and no longer served him at all. So the Lord burned with anger against Israel, and he turned them over to the Philistines and the Ammonites, who began to oppress them that year. For 18 years, they oppressed all the Israelites east of the Jordan River in the land of the Amorites, that is, in Gilead. The Amorites also crossed to the west side of the Jordan and attacked Judah, Benjamin, and Ephraim. The Israelites were in great distress. Finally, they cried out to the Lord for help, saying, "We have sinned against you because we have abandoned you as our God and have served the images of Baal." Okay, pausing there real quick. So, primarily, the Philistines and Ammonites took control of, one side, or at least took control of Israel on one side of the Jordan River. That was the side that had been conquered by the Israelites before crossing over. So this was not the side that had, like, Jericho and basically a lot of what the Philistines and Ammonites ruled over in this situation was what had been conquered while Moses was still leading the people, not Joshua. However, they did also cross to the other side and apparently attacked Judah, Benjamin, and Ephraim. Attacked, not necessarily conquered, though. Judah, based on previous verses and what happened in those, Judah probably would have been the most difficult to conquer, as they seemed to have the most successful conquests themselves out of all the tribes of Israel. But, I mean, I'm thinking these tribes would have been the first three that they would have likely come across or, encountered after crossing the Jordan River. So anyway, all this is happening. The Israelites are in a bad spot. And then, of course, they realize they did wrong and they cry out to God for help. So, then verse 11... The Lord replied, "Did I not rescue you from the Egyptians, the Amorites, the Ammonites, the Philistines, the Sidonians, the Amalekites, and the Maonites? When they oppressed you, you cried out to me for help, and I rescued you. Yet you have abandoned me and served other gods. So I will not rescue you anymore. Go and cry out to the gods you have chosen. Let them rescue you in your hour of distress." So, the people recognized that they turned against him, but I guess they turned so far against him and to all these other gods that the Lord basically says, like, I did all this stuff for you before, and yet you turned away from me. Why should I help you now? You're probably just going to turn away from me again. Cry out to these other gods of yours that you have been worshiping. Let them help you. Also, really not sure about the pronunciation on that. Could be maybe like Maonites? That might be a better... Because I say Maonites and it makes me think mayonnaise, which... Anyway, so Maonites. We'll go with that as the pronunciation now. But then, of course, that makes me think of, like, China because of Mao Zedong. And anyway. This is the problem with having so many references and things that just stay in your brain for no good reason. So God basically replies with, nope, get somebody else to help you. After, the Israelites asked him for help. And then we get to verse 15. But the Israelites pleaded with the Lord and said, "We have sinned. Punish us as you see fit. Only rescue us today from our enemies." Then the Israelites put aside their foreign gods and served the Lord. and he was grieved by their misery. At that time, the armies of Ammon had gathered for war and were camped in Gilead, and the people of Israel assembled and camped at Mizpah. The leaders of Gilead said to each other, "Whoever attacks the Ammonites first will become ruler over all the people of Gilead." And that's where the chapter ends. That seems like kind of an odd spot to end the chapter. Unless maybe the next chapter it's going to get into, like, sort of the story of a particular person and them becoming judge. But, yeah, so they're all getting ready to fight now, but the fight hasn't actually happened yet. In any case, the Israelites, more fervently turn away from the other gods, start worshiping the Lord again, and then, the Lord kind of, has renewed sympathy for them. So, at that point, it seems like, so then the people of Israel assembled at Mizpah to, I guess, counter the attack of the Ammonites who are camped out at Gilead. And yeah, we'll just have to wait until chapter 11 to see what becomes of that situation. But that I guess does it for chapter 10. I don't really have any other thoughts. I gotta say, that is quite a number of different gods that the people turned towards. So perhaps it was because there were so many other gods, and it wasn't even like there was one that came to the forefront. So it kind of almost gave the impression that they would turn to basically any other god, as they thought all these other gods were more worthy of their worship than the Lord. So that could have also fed a little bit into the Lord's initial response to their cries for help. It's like, well, clearly you have so many other options, so why not ask one of them for help? It seems a bit more human of a response from the Lord than we would tend to think of. But, it is stated within the Bible that God is a jealous God. So, I guess maybe with that knowledge, it's a little less surprising. But anyway, okay. Now, officially, no more thoughts on chapter 10. All right, so we kind of breezed through two of the judges early on in that chapter. And then we got this situation with the Ammonites and technically the Philistines, like, taking over parts of Israel, especially east of the Jordan River, but then also, like, at least fighting some of the different tribes west of the Jordan River. So we've kind of set up a scene that doesn't have a resolution yet. It makes me wonder if that'll get figured out in the next chapter or so. But anyway, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell if you're on YouTube to get updates when I post new videos. If you're seeing this over on Rumble, give me a follow there. Either way, look down in the description to get info on other social media pages and all that good stuff, including my Discord server, where you can, interact with stuff between videos more easily. Also gives you one spot to keep track of all my videos that, like, you don't have to do any other special looking at notifications or anything for. But anyway, and below the description, leave comments with any thoughts you have. So that's it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. But whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.